I thought the college football playoff committee was going to drop Miami into the teens, but that didn't happen. Here's the situation for the Hurricanes.
You are Locked On Canes, your daily podcast on the Miami Hurricanes, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Miami still controls their ACC Championship destiny. They still control their CFP destiny. I am Alex Dono, University of Miami alumnus, co-host of Locked On ACC and writer for Canes County at Rivals. Thank you so much to the everydayers for making Locked On Canes your first listen and your first watch today. We're available free wherever you get your podcasts. We're free on YouTube. We're part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code Locked On College for $20 off your first purchase. On this episode, we will talk about Miami hopefully maximizing the offense the rest of the way, because the offense wasn't quite prolific enough to bail out the defense this past week. Whether the Georgia Tech game was a wake-up call or if, that's always who Miami's going to be. But let's talk about the new rankings, college football playoff and otherwise. So Miami last week, before losing to Georgia Tech, we're all still licking our wounds from that. But last week, Miami was ranked number 4 in all major polls. Associated Press, Coaches Poll, those both come out on Sundays. Miami was also 4th in the college football playoff poll, which comes out on Tuesday nights. That one just dropped last night. And in those first two polls, when they came out on Sunday, Coaches, AP, they dropped Miami all the way from number 4 to number 12. Big hit after losing to an average Georgia Tech team, right? So we all know the CFP, they do things a little bit differently. They claim, hey, we kind of go to the beat of our own drum. We don't just parrot what the AP and the coaches poll say. So I had this kind of thought in the back of my mind, not that it really matters, and we'll talk about why it doesn't, but I was wondering if the CFP poll would just tumble Miami even farther down. Like, hey, there's some other teams out there that are earning style points even in losses. Miami, I know that the game was a one-score game, but you give up 271 rushing yards to a team that was the walking wounded in Georgia Tech. The defense looks so suspect. I really thought that they were going to tumble Miami down, but that didn't happen. So the new CFP rankings come out on Tuesday night, and Miami is still inside the top 10. Oregon, predictably, they keep winning at number 1. Ohio State, Texas at 8-1, they're 2nd and 3rd. Penn State, Indiana at 10-0 rounds out the top 5. BYU, it's significant that they're now ranked in front of Miami at number 6. They're still undefeated at 9-0. Tennessee and Notre Dame, a couple one-loss teams ahead of Miami. Hurricanes coming in at number 9. Then you've got somehow, I wasn't expecting this, Miami in front of both the 2-loss SEC darlings, Alabama and Ole Miss at 7-2 and 8-2. Georgia, who just lost to Ole Miss at number 12. Boise State, SMU. SMU didn't even play last week, and they're dropping spots in the polls. Texas A&M at 15. So the Hurricanes, let me put them back on the screen here for those watching the YouTube version. Miami holds on to a top 10 ranking, number 9 in the country, according to the CFP. So, and by the way, the College Football Playoff Committee, and obviously this is just a projection, but they still project the Hurricanes to win the ACC. If that happens, obviously the seeding Miami gets would be different from the ranking that they get at the end of the year. So Miami, they predict the Hurricanes to now finish with the 4th seed, which would still give you a first-round bye. So Miami did drop a seed behind BYU. It was flip-flop last week. Miami was the 3rd. Now Miami drops to the 4th seed. So the way that they project it right now, the Hurricanes would just kick their feet up during the first round, and then after their bye, they're projected to play the winner of a 5 seed versus 12 seed matchup between Ohio State and Boise State. While I appreciate the College Football Playoff Committee not dropping Miami as far as the other polls did, you have to wonder, how much of that has to do with the fact that, hey, they know Miami's going to bring the TV ratings, right? Hurricanes against Georgia Tech, that was the highest rated ESPN game since week 1 of college football. A lot of people, maybe there was some hate watching. They tuned in to see if Georgia Tech could pull off that win against Miami. So I appreciate the CFP not dropping Miami even out of their top 10. But the reality is, guys, if you're following these playoff scenarios, Miami's current ranking really doesn't mean anything if the Canes don't win out. If you lose one more game, you're probably out of the playoff completely, because we're not expecting the ACC to be a two-bid league this year. I think only the ACC champion, which would be, guaranteed a top 4 seed and a first round bye. I think only the ACC champion, whether that's Miami or SMU or Clemson, if they can still sneak in to the ACC championship game. So Miami now, we talk about maybe having a first round bye in the playoffs. Miami has a bye week right now. You need to get healthy. You need to regroup and refocus, because Miami must beat Wake Forest at home, Syracuse on the road, and likely SMU in the ACC championship game. Because if you were to finish 11-1 regular season, if you win out, but then if you lose a game, whether it's close or not, if you lose to SMU for the ACC championship, you're probably not getting into the playoff. Now, maybe if you lose a really close one to SMU and there's other cannibalization within that college football playoff field, a couple of other teams that are, in that mix who get upset losses before the end of the year, maybe you would have a chance to get in with 2 losses. But guys, I've been saying this for a couple weeks. I think the only way the ACC would be a 2-bid league for the college football playoff, or would have been a 2-bid league, because I think that this ship has already sailed, was if Miami were to have gone 12-0 regular season, but then lost to SMU in the ACC championship game. And at 12-1, I think SMU, obviously conference champion, would have gotten in, and Miami at 12-1 would still get in. But at 11-2, I don't know if that's enough. So listen, we can talk about it. We can have conversations about Miami being number 9 in the college football playoff, but I think it's pretty clear, if you don't win out, if you don't win your next 3 games, including an ACC championship game, you're more than likely going to be missing the college football playoff. Now, I'll ask you guys this question, and you can answer in the comments below, or you can send us an X post at Locked On Canes. If Miami were to go 11-2 and barely miss the college football playoff, would you consider that a successful season? Because if I told you guys preseason, hey, Miami, what if you go 11-2, you make the ACC championship game, but you fall just short, would you call that a successful year? Not all of you, but a lot of you probably would have signed up for that before the season began. For me, while I wouldn't call it a failure of a season, and it would be an improvement from the last 2 years, I wouldn't call that successful, because my goal has always been to win the ACC championship. I know a lot of folks preseason were saying, hey, Florida State, they're going to repeat as champions. Turns out Florida State is the worst team in the country. People should be talking more about that, by the way, Florida State's fall from grace, but people kind of forgot that team existed. But a lot of people had either Florida State or Clemson winning the conference. I mean, nobody was talking about SMU, who might win it. They have a chance to win it. Very few people were talking about Miami. It was all about Florida State and Clemson, but not me. My goal has always been to win the ACC. I thought Miami had an opportunity. They have an opportunity still to do so. So I wouldn't call that a successful season, but I wouldn't call it an outright failure either. But there's obviously things that we can call micro failures throughout the team, because I didn't expect the defense to struggle as much as they have with certain seemingly simple aspects of football. So let me know, if Miami were to go 11-2 but miss out on the playoffs, would you be satisfied with that, or are you going to be angry throughout the offseason? And listen, I'm not settling for that, folks, because again, Miami wins their next 3 games. They're ACC champions, and they're in the college football playoff. If they do that, that's a successful year. But we have a lot to talk about. What needs to happen for Miami to get there? And folks, we're going to be answering questions on this episode from the Locked On Canes Insiders. If you want to become an insider, click the link in the show description below. Try it free for 14 days. You get text messages from my phone to yours. Keep the conversation going. Keep it locked right here. We're only getting started on this brand new episode of Locked On Canes. I'm only getting started on the Game Time app. Guys, I'm looking at tickets starting at $21 for Miami versus Wake Forest after the bye week. Go out there and support the Canes. It's a noon game. I know that may not be ideal for some of you, but the weather's getting cooler out there, and your Hurricanes have an opportunity to get into that college football playoff. So go out there and support your team. You're going to find the best deals on the Game Time app. It's the only ticket app that I use. Game Time has a new feature called Game Time Picks that makes getting tickets to see your favorite teams play live even easier, because Game Time Picks filters out all the fluff to show you only incredible deals on great seats, so you don't have to waste time searching through thousands of tickets. I love the all-in pricing feature on Game Time. It shows you the total upfront with no surprise fees at checkout. I can get a panoramic view from my seat right there in the app before I buy on Game Time. So take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and by the way, we have a deal for you, because when you sign up with our code Locked On College, we're going to give you $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code Locked On College for $20 off. Download Game Time today. What time is it? It's game time. Thank you so much for making this episode of Locked On Canes your first listen and your first watch today. We're available free wherever you get your podcasts. We're free on YouTube. We're part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. So Miami's still clinging inside that top 10 in the college football playoff rankings. Hurricanes are off this week. Wake Forest the following week at home. On the road at Syracuse after that. That's your regular season. Let's go to questions from our Locked On Canes insiders. Again, you can click the link in the show description below. Become an insider. Try it free for 14 days. Then if you like it, you can opt in for $4.99 a month. Give you a lot of added value on there. Question from Marcus. He says, hey, how are those top 4 CFP seeds filled, the positions? He says, we were 3 last week. Now we're 4. Is it the record of the conference champs? So it's the ranking of the conference champs. So the reason why Miami and their project, and it's all a projection, by the way, because Miami's got to win the ACC. Like, they project Miami to win the ACC. You've got to actually do it, all right? But the reason why they dropped Miami from a 3 seed to a 4 seed is because another projected conference champion, BYU, who's projected to win the Big 12, which is also not a guarantee that they do that, but they're projected to do so since BYU is ranked higher than Miami as a projected conference champ. Miami was ranked higher than BYU last week. Miami lost, BYU didn't. That's why BYU rises into the 3 seed and Miami falls into the 4 seed. So it's the ranking of the conference champions is what decides the seeding. So that's why. But listen, either way, whether it's the 1, 2, the 3, the 4, if Miami can grab one of those, they're not going to grab the 1 or 2. But point being, if they can grab any of those first round buys, I'm good with that. Okay. We get this question from our guy BP, who really enjoyed, as a lot of you did, the Clinton Portis interview yesterday. Man, shout out to Clinton for joining us, one of the greatest Hurricanes of all time. Shout out to the truth teller for making it happen, for getting CP on the show. I love talking to Clinton. BP writes, hey, Portis was one of the best Bruce guests that you've ever had on. Says, my question for you is, was this loss a wake-up call, like Portis said it might be, because we didn't take Georgia Tech seriously like he had talked about with Washington? You remember when Portis was on the 2000 team, they lost to Washington, then they went on a run, and they should have been in the BCS game that year. He said, was this just a things catching up with us we've gotten away with all year? Might be somewhere in the middle, but he says, I'm struggling to believe that Mario would let them think that way. It's definitely something in the middle, because, of course, you can't ignore the defensive patterns that have been taking place, because, last Saturday was not the first time Miami's defense has struggled. Now, they hadn't struggled quite that much against the run, because outside of the Virginia Tech game and now the Georgia Tech game, Miami had been significantly better against the run than they were against the pass. This time around, they were bad against both. It's just Georgia Tech didn't throw a lot, so the running stuff looked a lot worse. But no, it's definitely somewhere in the middle, because like you can't watch what happened Saturday and think there aren't at least some tweaks you've got to make. Okay. Like, we had Larry Bluestein on the show Monday, and like Blue was really calling to give some of these different guys and some of the younger guys more playing time on the defense. And I I understand why you would rely a lot on upperclassmen and veterans when you're a 9-1 team, but folks, this can't get a lot worse on defense. So are you really telling me with some of the ways, and it's been shocking, some of the ways that a guy like Tyler Barron is pinching inside and just completely ignoring the edge? Like, that was one of the frustrating things about watching film from the Georgia Tech game. So I mean, that's either a technique that's obviously fixable, or you play someone else who may not make those mistakes. I mean, maybe we should be getting a little bit more playing time from guys like Justin Scott and Cole McConaughey on the defensive line at linebacker, maybe some more playing time for Cameron, Bobby Pruitt, Popo Aguirre. Now, Popo was he was injured, banged up for the Georgia Tech game. I hope he's healthy again, because in the opportunities Popo has gotten this year, he's played well. Jalen Alderman played really well against Georgia Tech, and I hate to say it because he's one of my favorite human beings on the team, but Kiko is struggling so much this year. And it's gotten to the point where, like, you hate to take away playing time from somebody who was the best defensive player on the team last year. I put him even, Ruben Bain had an awesome year last year. I thought Kiko still was the best defensive player on the team. This has really been a rough go. And I don't know why, teams have found a way to expose him in coverage. I know he had a shoulder injury coming into the season. Maybe that's still affecting him. I don't know what it is, but I think you need to mix it up a little bit more. Like, I think there are other guys who should be getting some playing time there. There are some techniques that seem fixable. With that said, I'm not saying you can turn Miami's defense into a top 5 unit after the bye week, right? Some of the poor tackling angles, some of this stuff is not fixable, at least not fixable in week 11 or 12. Maybe some of this was fixable preseason and that didn't happen. But I think there could be a wake-up call could be had, BP, to answer your question. There's got to be a way to tweak this defense to make it a little bit more presentable and a little bit more ready. Now, other teams are going to try to do what Georgia Tech successfully did, and that's, pound the rock and keep Cam Ward off the field, limit Miami's possessions. Now, Wake Forest and even Syracuse they're not quite built that way. So I think we're going to see more shootout types of games. But the other part of the wake-up call thing, BP, was it was an uncharacteristically, mediocre performance from Miami's offense. That I definitely think is fixable. Fixing the defense would be tougher. Fixing the offense, I think, absolutely can happen, because you had some questionable play calling and decision making on going for it on some of the fourth downs you did. You had some questionable execution. I mean, Cam Ward hit Sam Brown right in the numbers for a third down conversion, and he dropped it. Game could have been completely different if he caught that pass. Miami only went 3 for 10 on third down, which was very uncharacteristic for this group. If you make the argument on defense, hey, they are who they've been most of the season, you say the same thing about the offense. They came into that game 58.8% on third downs, only 30% last week on third down. I don't think that's who they were. I just think you had drives derail and defuse that don't usually happen to Miami. So I think the offense absolutely can and will bounce back. I also think the offense, they need to take what's in front of them a little bit more. We'll talk more about that with some of the other questions coming in. But yeah, BP, I think it's a combination where this could absolutely be a wake-up call. Some of it's not fixable. Some of it is, because, again, if, Miami, they had defensive issues throughout the season, but they still always found a way to rely on Cam Ward and win these games. Now they've had the wake-up call that that's not going to happen every single week, that we all have to play better. We have to help our quarterback, because he can't bail us out every single week if we don't give him a little bit more help. Cam Ward is phenomenal, and he's not completely avoiding blame either, because we talked about him, playing too much hero ball and not, taking the plays that were right in front of him. So he wasn't perfect either this past Saturday, but he's got to get more help. The wake-up call, I think, is going to be realizing that. We get this question from Hurricane Keys, who says, hey, I'd like your opinion about our defense. Do you think that this bye week is coming at the right time, where we can work on some of the coverage issues and use our linebackers to be able to get us to win the next 3 games in a row and be able to make those playoffs? He says, I feel like the Georgia Tech game, we just allowed them to get the edge. Absolutely. And we kept pinching in our defensive ends and running man coverage on the back half of it, and it just allowed them to do whatever they wanted, even with giving up less points than our average in the ACC games. It still wasn't a very good look. I do have faith in the boys still. We have everything in front of us. It's time to do it. And by the way, I saw a lot of people who they're not looking at the full picture, because a lot of people are like, well, no, that loss was all on the offense because we know who our defense is. They only gave up 28 points. So, that should be enough for us to win. But here's what you're ignoring. They only gave up 28 points, but they also gave up a -10 in time of possession. Georgia Tech possessed the football for 35 minutes to Miami's 25. That's part of football as well. It's not just the number of points you're giving up, it's also the amount of time you're giving to the opposing team. So, if you want to hang your hat on only giving up 28 points, I guess you're free to do that. But to me, the bigger issue was you allowed Georgia Tech. I mean, they had that one drive in the second quarter that was 10 minutes and 45 seconds. Like, no matter how many points you're giving up, you're taking away opportunities from your offense, and that was bad. So, in terms of like the bye week coming at the right time, I like the fact that there's 2 bye weeks now. I'm not exactly even sure when that happened, but 2 bye weeks now a year is a thing. It's good to have a late season bye week like this. I mentioned, even guys who have been playing are banged up. They can use a week to get healthier, right? I mean, a guy like Popo, who could be an important player for the final 3 games, he's getting opportunity to mend. Damari Brown is getting another week to mend and get ready. I would love to see Miami cornerback Damari Brown able to make a return for the Wake Forest game, because I know he's been close for a while, according to Mario Cristobal. There's players on the offense, even if they're playing through it, that are banged up. So, you talk about a must-win 3 games coming up. It's good to have a bye week before that. And also, this bye week gives you an extra chance to reflect on everything that went wrong against Georgia Tech. So I'm down with it. And everything's still in front of us, like you say. We get this question from Steve in Port Orange, who says, hey, does Miami need to upgrade coordinators after this season, or just keep upgrading personnel? Steve, the answer to that question is yes. Now, I'm not even ripping the coordinators. I mean, I know the defense has been problematic, but whatever happens. I mean, it's hard for me to make off-season predictions when we still have at least 3 games, probably more than 3 games left to play this year. But yeah, you're absolutely going to try to upgrade the personnel. You've got some talented true freshmen coming in, especially in the defensive backfield, but you can't necessarily rely on true freshmen next year unless you're OJ Frederick. Then you can rely on a guy like that. But Miami's going to work the transfer portal, of course. Last season they were aggressive. I think they'll be aggressive again this year. We've even seen like Shannon Dawson maybe linked to some head coaching jobs. Are we going to lose Dawson? I don't know what's going to happen with Guidry after the year, but Mario Cristobal says it after every season. You always look, every offseason is an opportunity to evaluate, tweak, and upgrade. Whether you're upgrading coaches or you're upgrading your roster, every offseason is an opportunity to do that. So Mario Cristobal does not, if Miami, falls short of his or anyone's goals this year, he's not going to settle. He's going to look to upgrade whatever he can. So the answer to that question is yes. Oh man, we got some good questions we still need to answer about Miami's front 7, about whether Miami needed to be punched in the mouth, how this is going to help them, maybe help them moving forward. I will note that everyone, unless outside of Oregon and Indiana, everyone's losing some games. It's just Miami. We have so much PTSD from previous years, because like when Miami loses one game, a lot of fans just assume, spiral is cut, because we've seen it happen so many times before. But maybe that won't happen this year, because again, this is a different quarterback. This is different leadership. You guys want to keep it locked right here. We're not done yet on this brand new episode of Locked On Canes. I'm certainly not done yet with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Get ready to tackle the NFL action, because right now on FanDuel, new customers can bet $5 and get $150 in bonus bets if you win. The FanDuel Sportsbook app gives you everything you need to place live bets on the NFL all in one place. I love live betting. So when you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more right on the same page where you place your bets. You guys are lucky that I'm here today and I'm not out on a boat somewhere, because I won a 14-team college basketball parlay yesterday. So I'm still, I mean, there were a lot of big favorites in there, by the way. So I didn't, rake in like 50-1 odds or anything like that. But I won a 14-team parlay yesterday. I'm loving the fun that I'm having on FanDuel. When you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, so much more right on the same page where you place your bets. Just visit fanduel.com to join today, and you'll get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win that first $5 bet. That's fanduel.com. Never waste a hunch and make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sports betting partner of the NFL. Thank you so much for making this Wednesday episode of Locked On Canes your first listen and your first watch today. We're available free wherever you get your podcasts. We're free on YouTube. We're part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. So with Miami not having a game this weekend, we're going to be rooting for Pittsburgh to upset Clemson. I don't think it's going to happen. Pitt is falling. They've lost their past two games, but they are hosting Clemson. Clemson, though, I think are 10-point favorites on the road at Pitt. But if Pitt beats Clemson, it gives Miami more room for error, right? Because Clemson's rooting for Miami to lose one of their, remaining two games in the regular season, because that can allow Clemson to get back into the championship picture. Pittsburgh is Clemson's last ACC game. So if Pitt can do us a favor, it's going to give Miami some breathing room to possibly make that ACC championship game. We get this question from Gil. Gil says, hey, would our defense play better if we had Ray Lewis on the sidelines every game from here on out? Says, I know Mark Richt has said that if Ray Lewis was on the sideline and he was playing defense, he would definitely play better, because Ray Lewis is a pretty scary dude, Gil says. I feel like, the offense has played really well with Michael Irvin at every game. Yeah, I know they didn't play well enough to win last week, but and wasn't Ray Lewis was on the sidelines for the Florida State game, which was, probably the second best defensive performance Miami had of the season. Now, the haters would say that it's only because Florida State's offense is the worst in the country, but it was still Miami's second best beyond the Florida game, their second best defensive performance of the year. So, and guys, I know your question was a little tongue in cheek, but I am all about getting as many former players on the sidelines as possible. I've loved seeing Michael Irvin for basically the entire season on the Canes sideline. And I thought he spent too much time at Colorado games last year. He's spending all that time at Miami games this year, and I love it. I'd love to have Ray Lewis. I'd love to have Ed Reed back on the sidelines. Let's bring them all home, all right? We get this question from Jake, who says, I feel like Miami relies too much on Cam Ward to make Superman type of plays. Do you think the Canes could do a better job of balancing out the run and pass, or would you just like to see Fletcher and Martinez get more carries? Well, we had Clinton Portis on the show yesterday, and CP, and maybe he's a little biased towards the running game because, it's Clinton Portis, but he did say he'd like to see Miami maybe establish the run earlier in most of these games. I also I'd like to see maybe more creativity in the running play designs, get more stuff to the outside. That was another thing that Portis was advocating for. But listen, I am all for it. As far as relying too much on Cam Ward, he's so special. That's not necessarily a bad thing, but that doesn't mean you can't mix in a little bit more of the run. And unfortunately, Miami would really like to use their running game more in the fourth quarters to wear teams down. But that only really works when you're playing from a lead or you're playing in a close game. When you're down double digits in the fourth quarter, it's a little bit harder to keep the running game moving. So that's one of the reasons why you rely so much on Cam Ward. And listen, for Cam, I think that holding on to the football for a little bit too long last week was an issue, because the sacks that Miami gave up were more about the time, he was holding on to the football than, actually the offensive line giving things up. So listen, Cam Ward has been very capable of playing Superman. He's, won 9 games out of 10 doing that. But yeah, if you can take some pressure off your quarterback, you should absolutely do that. Let's see. We get this question from Matt, who says, Hey, this is the second year in a row that our offense has been lackluster against Georgia Tech. Did they just have Shannon Dawson's number? He says. Um, well, different scenarios. I mean, last year, Georgia Tech's dropping 8 guys into coverage, and Tyler Van Dyke was just, insisting to throw. I think he threw 3 interceptions in that game last year. TVD. I think Miami turned the football over 5 times. This year, obviously Ward didn't throw any interceptions in the game, but I do think that there were checkdowns that were available to him that he wasn't taking. I think the big thing, and I don't remember what the time of possession numbers were for last year. I assume Miami probably had more time of possession against Georgia Tech a season ago, but goes back to, again, me not playing complementary football when your defense, allows those big long drives and you're out possessed by 10 minutes. That's going to take something away from your offense as well. Whatever it is, I will say I did think Georgia Tech probably on both sides of the football out schemed Miami last Saturday. So Georgia Tech has our number. There's no question about it. No question about it. And we've even had Georgia Tech trolls in our live chat the last couple days. I've never seen that before. Like, we're used to seeing Florida trolls, although they've gotten quiet. Florida State trolls, but they're 1-9. They're an embarrassment to all of college football. Now we're getting Georgia Tech trolls in our chat. So they're getting cocky. They've owned Miami, and they own the all-time series. They've beaten Miami 15 times. Miami's beaten them 14 times. See if I can answer one more short question here. By the way, I leave way too many questions unanswered. We got to do another Q&A this week because I talk too much. Like, I'll take a short question. I'll give you an essay for an answer. I got A's in English. Math was a different story. We're talking C level math, but A's in English. Very verbose. We get this question from Giant Ninja, who says, hey, what's your take on let's see more Popo and less Kiko? Speed matters, and since it's Wake Forest, it wouldn't be a bad idea to evaluate some new looks out there. Pre-snap motion is killing our defense. By the way, you're right about pre-snap motion. Eye candy, and our eyes are all over the place. It's been rough. Hopefully Popo's healthy, because I think he deserves more playing time. I also think Jalen Alderman deserves more playing time, and I like to see some more of Cameron Bobby Pruitt, true freshman, but I think he can help. He can help. Tampa Lou asks, hey, why do you think we can't get a huge name at defensive back in recruiting? He's talking about we missed last year, and it's not looking good this year. Miami's got a really good defensive back class already verbally committed. Like, Jabari Antoine, Chris Ewald, Hilton Drake Stubbs. These guys were wanted by all the big programs in the country. Now, I guess when you're talking about missing on top guys, Miami's probably not going to land DJ Pickett. I'll say it. I don't think he's coming here. Miami missed out on Cormani McClain a couple of years ago, but his career hasn't exactly panned out so far. I'm hoping Ben Hanks Jr. is a guy that I really want to flip from Florida. Shamar Arno is a guy I really want to flip from USC. Miami's already got a really good defensive back class. I'd like to see them finish with an elite defensive back class. And I'd like you guys to smash the like button. If you're watching us on YouTube, hit that like button, subscribe to Locked On Canes. If you're listening to the audio version, subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google, wherever you get your pods. Make Locked On ACC your next listen. Kenton Gibbs and I take you around the conference, and we'll talk to you next time on another episode of Locked On Canes, part of the awesome Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.